You ever look at a statistic and just think, okay, that tells me what happened, but why? Why did so many people suddenly buy that one product? Or why do they feel so strongly about a certain issue? Well, today we're diving into qualitative research, the tool that helps us find the human story behind the numbers.
And really, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Spreadsheets, charts, graphs, they're great at telling you how many people did something. But they can't tell you about the hope, the fear, the little moment of frustration, or the pure joy that actually drove that decision. For that, you gotta dig a little deeper.
So what are we talking about when we say qualitative data? It's basically all the stuff that doesn't fit neatly into a spreadsheet. We're talking interview transcripts, notes from just watching people, photos, videos. It's the rich, sometimes messy, but always fascinating stuff of real human life. It's where the stories are. So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start by going beyond the numbers. Then we'll look at how researchers actually find the right people to talk to. We'll get into the art of a great interview, and then the power of just watching. And to wrap it all up, we'll ask the big one, how do we know we can actually trust any of this? All right, first things first, we have to shift our thinking a little bit. This is all about looking past the raw digits to find the deeper meanings and the real motivations that make people tick. Okay, so to understand what makes people tick, you need to talk to the right people. Simple, right? But of course, a researcher can't talk to everyone. So how do they choose? This first step is absolutely critical. It's called sampling, and it's all about finding the exact people who have the answers you're looking for.
And when it comes to sampling, there are basically two main roads you can go down. On one side, you've got probability sampling. Think of this like pulling names out of a giant hat. Everyone has an equal, random chance. It's perfect if you want a big, broad picture. But in qualitative research, we often use the other road, non-probability sampling. This isn't random at all. It's way more deliberate, more targeted, it's less about a random group and more about finding a purposeful one.
And this is where things get really clever. With snowball sampling, one person you interview leads you to the next, who leads you to the next. It's perfect for studying, say, a tight-knit community. With purposive sampling, you're hand-picking people because they are exactly who you need, like an expert in their field. Ad hoc is all about convenience, interviewing shoppers you find at a mall, for instance. And quota sampling is about making sure you get the right mix, like an equal number of younger and older people to get both perspectives. It's all about strategy.
Okay, so you found your people. Now what? Well, now it's time to listen. A research interview is so much more than just a Q&A. It's a real art form, a skill for uncovering stories that people might not even realize they have.
And these interviews come in three main flavors. You have the unstructured kind, which is really just a free-flowing conversation, great for when you're just starting to explore a topic. Then there's semi-structured. This is the most popular. You have a list of topics to cover, but you're free to go off script and follow interesting rabbit holes. And finally, highly structured, which is basically a survey read out loud. Every question is set in stone.
Now, let's see how a great researcher can go deeper. Imagine you're interviewing someone and they say, "I value good customer service." Okay, but what does that actually mean? That's pretty vague. A skilled interviewer knows exactly how to unpack that. Let me show you two simple but super powerful techniques they might use.
So they might ask this incredibly simple question. It's a technique called laddering up. By asking, "Why is that important to you?" again and again, they can climb a ladder from a vague statement like good service all the way up to a core personal value, like a deep need to feel respected or secure. It's amazing what that one little question can reveal. Now, the flip side of that coin is a technique called laddering down, which uses another deceptively simple question. Asking, "Could you give me an example?" brings a big abstract idea crashing down to earth. Suddenly, good service isn't an idea anymore. It's a real story about a specific time, a specific person, full of details and emotion. This is how you get to the good stuff. But here's the thing, talking to people is only half the picture. Because sometimes what people do tells a totally different and maybe more honest story than what they say. And that brings us to our next tool, observation, the simple art of learning by watching.
And a researcher can play 4 different roles here. They could be a complete observer, basically a fly on the wall, totally invisible. Or they could be an observer as participant, where people know they're there, but they just hang back and watch. A participant as observer jumps into the action, and everyone knows they're a researcher. And then there's the complete participant, where the researcher becomes one of the group, fully immersed, and sometimes the research role is a total secret.
So, we've talked to people, we've watched them, we've gathered all these rich, amazing stories. But how do we know they're legit?
How do we know this isn't all just a collection of random anecdotes? In other words, how do we prove that the research is actually trustworthy? This might just be the most important part of the whole process.
To get this, we have to quickly understand two different philosophies of research. One approach, the positivist view, is all about finding the single objective truth, like a law of physics. But qualitative research often comes from a different angle, the constructionist view. Here, the goal isn't to find the one truth, because it recognizes that different people have their own truths. The goal is to fairly and accurately represent all those different realities. So if the goal isn't just finding one single capital T truth, how on earth do we measure quality? Well, researchers have a toolkit for that. They use 4 key tests to make sure their work is solid, rigorous, and trustworthy. Let's break them down.
First up, you've got credibility. You can think of this as the truth test. It's pretty straightforward, actually. The researcher takes their findings back to the people they studied and asks, hey, does this sound right to you? Does this capture your experience? It's a powerful reality check.
Second is transferability, or the applicability test. See, qualitative research rarely claims this is true for everyone everywhere. Instead, the researcher's job is to paint a super detailed, rich picture of the situation. That way, you, the person reading it, can look at all that detail and decide for yourself if the lessons learned might apply or transfer to your own world.
Third, there's dependability, the consistency test. This one is all about showing your work. The researcher has to lay out their entire process, every decision, every step, so clearly that another researcher could come in, follow their tracks, and understand how they got from the raw data to the final conclusions. It's all about a logical, traceable process.
And finally, we have confirmability. This is the neutrality test. This is to make sure that the findings are clearly coming from the participants, their words, their actions, and not from the researcher's own secret biases or opinions. You have to be able to trace every conclusion right back to the data.
So, let's boil it all down. What are the big takeaways here? 1. Qualitative research is all about decoding the why. 2. It uses awesome methods like interviews and observation to get at those rich human stories. And 3. It's not just guesswork. It relies on 4 tough tests: credibility, transferability, dependability, and confirmability to prove it's trustworthy.
Because at the end of the day, that's really what this is all about. It's remembering that behind every number on a spreadsheet, every bar on a chart, there's a real person with a real story.
So I'll leave you with this little challenge. The next time you see a statistic in the news or in a report, just pause for a second and ask yourself, what's the human story I'm not seeing here? What's the why? Thanks for joining me on This Explainer.